where do we intervene, and where do we allow that child to have space? We're not coddling them, right? Because then you'll hear, oh, you're being a helicopter parent. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
where do you find that thin line?
Oh gosh, Jessica, these questions are so good. They're so juicy. Okay, so two things. The first thing is that is different parts of your brain and they develop at different times. The part that is able to regulate emotion in order to calm down from crying is known as to make decisions, to be an executive function, right? Sometimes I call that the upstairs brain, but that refers to that prefrontal cortex. Um, the upstairs brain is the one that allows you to come back to reality, right? It allows you to get out of that temper tantrum and ground yourself again. Okay. Kids have it, it's just underdeveloped. And throughout their teen years and eventually into their 20s, it will fully bloom. So, what happens when a kid loses their mind? And I don't mean that in a negative, demeaning way. I mean, literally, your mind has now been lost because you're having a tantrum or you're really upset about something and you're completely in your feelings. The world is going to end. Everything is terrible.
Yeah.
You are in what is called your downstairs brain, your primal brain, your lizard brain, Seth Godin calls it. And when you're in that brain, a lot of parents will try and give lectures. Like, let's say a kid is being unsafe on their bike, and then they fall off the bike and they hurt themselves and they start crying. You'll hear a lot of parents be like, well, I told you if you were doing that little wheelie tricks, you were going to fall over, right? Like, all those words do not work when your upstairs brain is offline. What does work is how to speak to the downstairs brain. And the downstairs brain, that primal part of your brain, the part that is activated, doesn't understand words, but it does understand touch. So comforting a child, like your tendency is to do, to me, is speaking to them without using words. It's communicating that you're here, like you said, that you're present, that you're not going anywhere. You don't have to say anything at all. You can rub their back. You can pull them close. You can even, I've done this before, I breathe in rhythm with them to sort of slow down their breathing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? But just, and without saying a single word, it brings them back. And then once their upstairs brain is back online, then maybe we can have a conversation about safety and what to do next time. But until that happens, it's completely useless. That's part one. Part two, when I was a teacher in the classroom, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, kids would cry. I guess surprised at how much crying there was at those ages, but there really is.
Yeah.
Kids cry a lot. And what I realized over time is that some of them do want that comfort. They want that hug. They want someone to come over and be with them. Some of them just want space. They want to be alone for a few minutes. And these are slightly older children. Okay. It could be true for younger children as well, but I find this very much true for people in middle childhood. Okay, so 6 to 12-ish. So what I would do when I'd see a kid crying, like some people would come up to me in my class, Mr. Hassan, Roger's crying. He's crying. And I turn to Roger and I'll say, hey, Roger, do you need to talk or do you need space? Do you need a hug or do you need space? And you'd be surprised, 50-50. Sometimes that kid would say, I just need space. And it would allow them to go and self-regulate. It would allow them at that age, I have to make clear at this age, they could go into a part of the room that was a little bit isolated and use their coping strategies to calm themselves down, because they're not always going to have someone there to help them. They need to learn that. Sometimes they're like, no, I need to talk it out, or I need to be with you and sit next to you while I cry. Right? So at some point we can ask our kids, what kind of support do you need? Right? And up to a certain age, I think tending to that downstairs brain, speaking in their language when their brain is offline, is the way that you teach them how to get back to themselves.
Wow. I love that answer. It's so compact, and it's so like the offline and downstairs and all that, because it makes so much sense. Because you'll see sometimes when they're crying and parents or people will be like, oh, they're being dramatic, but when they're in that state, for them it is really primal, isn't it? And they can't really tell the difference. So if they hear that kind of verbiage or that language, now it only furthers their I guess you could say their discontent even deeper, when they hear those kinds of things, right?
Yeah, and it also makes them feel like the person doesn't really care, doesn't really see them. Because to
Mhm.
them, this broken cookie means the world is ending. Like, as adults, we know it's going to be okay. There's more cookies, like there'll be another cookie one day. We
Right.
know that because we're adults and we've developed that part of our brain.
Right.
Okay. But like, even when you're like 17, 18 and you get dumped, you are beside yourself.
Mhm.
And your parents know you'll find another boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever at some point. You
Mhm.
will, right? This
Mhm.
is not the end, but it feels like the end. It's where a lot of emo music comes from. So it
Yes.
persists. It persists.
Right, right.